Good afternoon, everyone, or whatever time of the day this is that you might be joining us. Welcome to the Pursuit 365 podcast for Real Estate and Finance Fridays. Today, we are joined by Jim Doyle, who is an executive financial consultant with IG Wealth Management. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Shelly. It's great to be here.
It's great for you to join us today. I think there are so many different topics that we could discuss, judging from all of the letters after your name. If it has anything to do with money, it looks like you can deal with it.
I sure try.
So, when we talk about high net worth individuals or investing, I think a lot of people feel very intimidated that, unless they have a big nest egg, they can't really start. And it's really more than just about investing. It's about having a solid financial plan through your career. And whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you work for a corporation, there are different aspects to how people manage their money and plan for the future. Would you maybe give us a little bit of an overview of sort of who your ideal client is and how you work with people?
That's a great question. If you were asking me this 25 years ago, any dollar amount, as long as you had a motivation to do better financially, we were happy to take you on as a client. And over the years, what we've found is, the industry's become more complex, the needs are more complex, and people absolutely want the proper amount of attention and time. And that means we have to be a little bit more selective about who we choose to work with and the number of clients that we can take on in any given year. So we typically like to work with those who are, shall we say, financially comfortable. They've got a bit of resources, they've got some financial issues, whether they know them or not. And, it allows us to do some of the stuff where we can shine.
Excellent. So, what would you say one of your key service areas would be? I think financial services is quite complex. I think maybe your sector is maybe the only sector that's more overregulated for a good reason than real estate. But there's so many different ways people can plan, whether it's for working in the markets, stock market, or whether it's working with to find the best way to save and take advantage of all the tax savings incentives that might be out there. How do you approach somebody when they come to you and say, "Oh, I've got, something in here and something in there," or "I'm a day trader. I think I know what I'm doing, but all of a sudden I lost half my money." How do what's your approach when you first start working with a client and helping to guide them into the different products that might be available to them?
Well, I think you hit on the key word. I think for a lot of brokers in the investment community, their emphasis is predominantly on product performance, product selection. Okay, we want to encompass a much deeper discussion that goes beyond purely investments. But what are your goals? What do you want your money to actually do for you? What does it mean to you? What sort of history are you bringing to the table in terms of financial decisions that you're comfortable making or that you shy away from? Because all of these, at the end of the day, are the foundation that allow you to live a great life. So we work in the
Excellent.
advice channel. Okay.
Right. So is there like an intake questionnaire or something that you do to see where they're at? Or do people just arrive with a pile of money and say, "Here, you deal with it"?
I've heard of stories like that. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not quite our reality. Um, it's surprising. We've got some super wealthy clients who don't come from money. So financial literacy is something that they've picked up bit by bit over a period of time. And our role kind of comes in to say, well, there's some gaps in some of the knowledge that you might have to make better decisions. Okay. As wealth gets a little bit larger, you've also got other players involved in the situation. You might have an accountant that you're working with. You might have a business lawyer that's looking after things for you. And it's imperative, in my mind's eye, that we bring a collaborative approach to advising clients.
So, would you say that someone who's earning a salary or maybe get some, extra money through profit sharing in their company is a very different profile than an entrepreneur or a self-made type of person, or do they have similar goals and similar profiles?
I would say that they have very different aptitudes with regards to how they approach money and what it means to them. I'm a graduate of the UBC Sauder School of Business Family Enterprise Advisor Program. I love working with business owners. I love working with business families, okay, because they have dynamics that are all over the place, okay, and they are typically substantially underserved.
Right. So when you look at the type of dynamics in a family company, at least from my experience in some of the family companies I've been involved in, as the matriarch or patriarch ages and, the company could have been in existence for 20, 40, 50, 100 years. Um, the transition planning within the company is one thing, but the transfer of wealth between the companies and the individuals and um, the tax burdens that comes with and the different financial instruments that can be set up to ensure a true smooth transition. I mean, is that I would imagine, do you work with lawyers and accountants to figure this all out, or is that something that is it sounds like it's a team effort, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
When we look at the nature of the relationships that we have with clients, they're very personal. Okay, we're involved in their lives on a frequent basis. Okay, so we get to know all the good, the bad, and the ugly that's going on. They might only see their accountant once a year. Okay, or they might only interact with their lawyer once a year. So they're never going to have the depth of the personal experience where we can say, listen, we've got an issue here. We think you need a bit more guidance, from a legal perspective or from a tax perspective in terms of how you want that income to come out of your business or so again, it's about making sure that the resources that are there, the professional advisors that they're working with, are part of the process.
So what would some of those processes be?
Well, we were talking to a dentist a couple of weeks ago, and they were looking at implementing an estate freeze. Okay, so that means they kind of freeze the value of their company at a certain level, and the future wealth passes on to their kids. Um, but the accountant was probably not aware that there had also been a family trust that was settled just 2 years ago. So, not knowing that would make all the estate planning that they were trying to do be a bit bumpy. So, in an environment like that, we had a conversation with the accountant and said, we probably should get to the bottom of this issue before we look at implementing an estate freeze.
Right, right. So I know in my business I end up getting usually somewhat sad and panicked phone call, often a referral from a previous client of someone who's the executor of an estate and somebody's passed. And in a few cases, there's been no will. In the majority of cases, there is a will. And those are two entirely separate, deep topics that maybe we won't go right into right now. But as far as real estate as an asset class, and I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but as things that families hold and want to pass on from generation to generation, or they, have distinct instructions in their wills to sell the property and distribute the money. I heard the government recently has some interesting ideas about that. Do you often see in the estate planning also the will or the intended wishes of the investor to be part of what you also help with?
Well, if I had a magic wand, I would prefer that people prepare the heirs for the estate, not the estate for the heirs. Okay.
Right. I see what you're
Um,
saying.
Families don't talk about money. They abhor
Or
talking about
dying.
death or
Yeah.
disability. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and mom and dad's views on monies may not necessarily represent their kids' views on money. So, mom and dad do all the beautiful planning, and then they impose it on the kids, never having asked them, well, what would you like to see happen? So,
Right.
if that was in my magic wand tool chest, I'd certainly love to see some changes go on there.
Right. Well, it's I think when you get into the topic of people's money personality or what their preconceived notions or what their relationship is with money, it's very interesting that it's kind of a taboo topic in polite society. Oh, you don't talk about politics and money, but really, it is, in my observation, it's a very valuable topic that actually should be taught in schools. Like learning your one, two, threes and ABCs, like why aren't kids taught financial literacy in school? Or maybe they are and that just wasn't happening in the 70s when I was in school. But
Well,
from
Shelly,
it is such an important aspect of adulting for one thing. But even, you know, if you got an allowance where I know with my nephew, my sister and brother-in-law have three jars, and one's the get to spend jar, one's the donation jar, and one's the savings jar. And that's kind of how they've approached it with the 10-year-old. And once a year around Christmas, in his donation jar, he gets to go pick some toys, and they take it to one of the local places that's doing hampers or something. But like, this is so fundamental to, I think, basic success in life. Do you have like a financial planning 101 for really green people that have never had any kind of savings or plan before?
absolutely. Absolutely. I wonder if you were looking at our calendar for this morning. Uh, Both Paige and I were out at one of the elementary schools
No
delivering a
way.
program for junior achievement.
That is awesome. I was in junior achievement in high school, and that was in Calgary. And our sponsor, our corporate sponsor for our junior achievement, was a little airline that used to exist in Alberta called PWA. I think the joke was it was Peter's Widow Airline, because he was the premier of the province at one time. But it was Pacific Western Airline. But they flew us out to Vancouver for the day from Calgary, and we got to go in the flight simulator, and then they flew us home. But guess what we made? We made trivets. That was our business. That was our junior achievement business, was making those little trivets. And we got to go to the shop, and somebody got to be the foreman, and then there was the marketing people, and we sold those trivets. And that was grade 10, I think. And that experience stuck with me for a long time, right? It introduced you to a lot of the concepts of a product based business. But is this an ongoing thing that you did, or was this a one off with the junior achievement?
I've been involved as a volunteer for well over a decade, maybe two. And I'm paying it forward. My associate, Paige Brettle, who you know well, she was
Mm-hmm.
quite a dynamo this morning, delivering our program called Money Sense. So
Awesome. That's great. So does that go out to a lot of the schools? How does the school get a hold of you?
well, the school gets a hold of Junior Achievement, and Junior
Right.
Achievement reaches out to us, and invites us to either do the program in person or to do it digitally. Um, I'm kind of a fan of in person, um, and I know the digital format works well for a lot of other people. Uh, but it is up to the schools to invite junior achievement as a charity to come on in and share the different programs that they've got.
I just love that. I love that it's still around, and it's, I think it offers a lot of um, mentoring as well. If I recall, in some of the older grades, you can apply to either be a mentor or get a mentor.
Now,
Are there? Oh, go ahead. What are the sort of the main foundational things that the kids learn? That I guess it's foundational for everyone. You don't have to be a kid with an allowance to
it's
to
about
benefit.
making smart choices, okay, with spending, with saving, with sharing, looking at money choices. It's about security over the internet. Um, the fact that bad things happen, and it's nice to learn early that there are things that you can do to protect yourself and make life a little bit easier.
Right. Right. I'm just thinking of where we're going to go with this because I did really want to find out what you see as some of the biggest challenges of this huge transfer of wealth that is happening already and is going to continue happening as the baby boomers, especially the early boomers, sort of pass on and the next generations are in place.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe I can start by talking about one of the biggest activities that I see, which is difficult for me to understand. Okay. And that's about a joint ownership. Okay. Uh, we see an awful lot of parents that want to avoid probate. In this province, that gets
right,
up to be about 1.4% of the value of the asset. Okay. But I think it creates way more problems than it solves. Okay. Um, I like to use the example. You sell your property today for 2 million. Okay. What was it worth 10 years ago? Okay. Maybe a million. Okay. So if you added an adult child on 10 years ago, okay, and you sell the property today for uh, 2 million, okay, you basically have 500,000 worth of capital gains tax for the child who's been added on to title.
right,
If the parent had kept it in their name alone, would have had zero capital gains tax.
right. I
Now
see.
remember, if probate is 1.4%, okay, what are we talking savings? $28,000 maybe? And now we're paying tax on a half a million.
That's crazy.
So that's one of the bigger things that I see as a
Yeah.
challenge. Okay. The next is when parents try to be quote unquote fair. Okay. I'm going to put all my three kids equally on title, or I'm going to will the property equally to all three of my kids when I'm no longer here. And no one's ever talked to the other two kids. Well, how do you get out of this? Okay. You're going to have to re-register the property and sell it again. Maybe you're paying another property purchase transfer fee, a bit of legal conveyancing costs, and so forth, as opposed to someone simply having a conversation saying, well, who wants the house? Who wants the other investments? So much more could be accomplished if we could just get a little more communication.
Right. In the case where the deceased is survived by a spouse, if it's um, reverts back to the spouse only, that's one thing. But one of the things that I've often seen is that the spouse is a second marriage, and that the will actually dictates the first marriage family or people are going to get proceeds from a house that somebody doesn't actually want to move out of right away because they're the surviving current spouse.
Yeah.
So do you also help with entanglements as far as um, divorce and or remarriage
Big
and
part. Big
asset
part of what I do.
distribution or redistribution, I guess you could say.
I hold a certified financial divorce specialist designation. So
Mm,
this is something that I frequently have to talk to people about. If I get a chance to see a will where there's not a divorce going on, but I recognize that there is, a melding of families, and we're going to suggest that the legislation probably doesn't support what you've got drafted in your will, we might encourage a redrafting to more appropriately reflect things. Whether that involves a life interest in a piece of property where they can enjoy it during their lifetime, but the residue goes to a particular direction.
mm-hmm.
We also see where we have blended families where the union has only been a handful of years long, and they've got children into their 40s and 50s, and they say, I'd rather see the majority of my wealth go to my kids from my side, if you wouldn't mind, and your kids can have your stuff, type of thing. But that just means you take a little bit of time to draft these agreements so that we don't leave a conflict as the legacy for the family.
Conflict, money. Oh my goodness. Do you find sometimes that you feel like you actually should also have a psychiatry designation as part
Well,
of your designation? Because I sure do sometimes. You're
as
dealing
a
with high anxiety and high stakes decisions sometimes. And how do you find navigating through those kinds of sometimes emotionally charged conversations?
Well, when I joined Collaborative Divorce Vancouver, they said, listen, Jim, in order to join our group, you've got to take mediation training. Okay? So it gives us an opportunity to keep lines of communication open so people can actually get to an end result that they've authored, not be have it imposed on them. So that's a big part. Um, I'm actually comfortable in the conflict space. So it's just being patient with allowing people to be heard. And when manners kind of get forgotten, suggesting that maybe we could try this a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think part of mediation is also, uh, looking for the win-win for everybody. But sometimes it's a lose-lose. People just aren't going to be happy no matter what. When you find that people have divorced and they're now again looking at a new relationship, and do you help negotiate or figure out um, a prenup, or have you ever suggested something like that and been met with dumbfounded opposition?
Well, when there's an imbalance in the wealth, okay, it's not uncommon for me to suggest, let me be the one that puts the words on the table, okay, and you can choose to take the advice or not take the advice. But I believe I have a fiduciary duty to try and protect people, okay.
Hmm.
And then the family understands that it's not coming from the people who are getting together in the new relationship. It's coming from the advisor who's there to protect one person or possibly both people in that relationship.
Yes, I have actually found, you know, I still end up working with many first time buyers, but certainly earlier in my career I was working with a lot of first time buyers. I had a first time home buyers program, and I actually really enjoyed the process, and I still enjoy the process of educating people about buying their first home. But when I would get a couple that weren't even married yet and were in the throes of their romance, and you know you get them talking at a table about what their needs and wants and what their perfect home looks like, and they've never even discussed fireplace, no fireplace, or you know pets allowed, not pets allowed, or balcony, no balcony, like some basic things in housing that you guys realize that buying a home is almost a bigger thing, in my opinion, than the wedding. like the wedding's a party that everybody gets invited to, and it is a big day, and it is a social, construct for the joining of, your families and all of that. But beyond that, signing mortgage documents, qualifying, in some cases, I think two or three I can think of, um, both called me in tears in separate occasions, going, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't see how I could ever live with this person. They like open style and I don't, So it's really interesting to me anyways how, you know, finding a home and or talking about money and deciding how people make money decisions in a relationship can actually be a source of conflict in a relationship if they've never really discussed it before.
I think the second most important discussion to have for a new couple is a financial compatibility discussion. Okay, what's your feelings around the use of credit? Okay, if we had XYZ dollars that was extra, what would we do with it? What's your perspective on the family in terms of the decisions that get made? Do mom and dad call the shots and you follow? There's an awful lot of things I think people, might find it nicer if they could talk about before they hit a conflict issue and go, oh, this is uglier than I thought it was going to be.
Hmm. Do you have in my space, there's like a wish list for the home, and that seems, you know, somewhat not related necessarily to values, but in a way it is. It comes back to what they value their environment wanting to be. But do you have a sort of a values checklist you use to either evaluate your clients or to like when you see an obvious difference in attitudes towards spending and saving and investing, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, Shelly, it starts for me in the intake process. Okay. And by the way, this is a great question. Okay. Um, when I get a sense that somebody's not actively involved in the discussion, I want to engage them. Okay. I don't do appointments without the spouse there. Okay.
Hmm.
How can you make life decisions for somebody else when they're not there? Okay.
Exactly.
But very important to me is get them engaged and get them maybe to repeat back to me or have me, if I can, in a small way, understand that what we've just said, what that actually means to them. So, um, and you'd be surprised sometimes just the fact of asking opens up the door to an awful lot of other things.
Is there any kind of preparation questionnaire you send out ahead of time so that you might have a heads up on these things, or do you like to just have the initial meeting and start from square one?
I think in our world, because everything is about customizing and personalization, we need to be fluid enough that we can say, well, let's talk about how you choose socks as an example. Okay. Uh, you don't typically meet people that wear the same socks. So everybody's got a slightly different favor and why they like what they like. And I know it sounds kind of silly when I put it that way, but it's the best way that I can kind of say these conversations have to flow a little bit organically because you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get different levels of participation and different levels of deferment. Okay. And we work a lot in a number of ethnic communities where there are cultural values as well that come to play, and we certainly want to honor those, but we certainly also create levels of engagement.
Excellent. Well, we I promised that it wouldn't go super long, but I just from a point of curiosity, I'm going to ask you what each of your letters after your name stand for. What's a CFP?
So, a certified financial planner, I think that's where you want to start when you're getting planning advice.
Excellent. What is a TEP?
That's a registered trust and estate practitioner. So that means I'm probably up on wills and estates. I don't draft legal documents, but I
Right.
understand the language and I can translate it in usable dialogue.
Excellent. What is a CLU?
That's a chartered life underwriter. So dealing with insurance and risk management.
What is a CDFA?
Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Look at the financial consequences of the choices that they're making.
Could have used that one 25 years ago. Okay, what is a CIWM?
That's a Certified International Wealth Manager.
So you're an international man of not mystery, but of managing people's money.
Well,
Um, go ahead.
folks come to us with a lot of questions. Families are becoming more geographically diverse these days. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert on every single country out there, but I'm going to be in a position of knowing, hey, listen, you've got something that we need to look at a little further as it affects other areas of your planning.
Right. And as a sort of a parting discussion or parting wait, what would you say is the number one most important thing people need to know about starting to invest, getting their investment
I would say forget
together?
about performance, if I can say that and not offend people. Focus on your goals, okay? Focus on your timeline. Focus on the things that you can focus on that are important to you, okay? And then move the discussion on to products, how you might go about accomplishing all those things.
Excellent. Well, I really enjoyed speaking with you today, Jim, and I'm sure it won't be the first or the last time. And shout out to Paige Brettle as well. I'll be having her on in a couple weeks. We're going to discuss some of the really interesting projects that she's involved with. But you're a dynamic duo, and I really appreciate you taking time out from your very busy schedule today to come on to the Pursuit 365 podcast. Have a great day, Jim.
Thank you, Shelly. It was fun being here.